A guy strolled into his workplace sporting two black eyes. His colleagues, seeing his condition, were naturally quite worried and curious. They gathered around him and asked him to spill the beans on what had happened. The man seemed hesitant at first, but after a little coaxing, he began his tale. "Well, you see, this all started when I was out running errands yesterday." He had just wrapped up his shopping at the grocery store and was feeling pretty pleased with himself for being so quick and efficient. However, as he was walking out, he noticed that the button on his pants fly had come loose. He tried to fix it right there, fumbling around, but his efforts seemed to only make the situation worse. Embarrassed and not keen on the idea of walking around with his pants looking like that, he suddenly thought of his neighbor. She lived just across the hall from him and was a married woman known for being super helpful and friendly. Thinking she could help, he made his way over to her apartment and explained the predicament he found himself in. The neighbor, true to her helpful nature, didn't hesitate to lend a hand. She welcomed him inside her apartment and got to work on sewing the button back on his pants. They chatted and shared a laugh or two as she worked, and the man was starting to feel less embarrassed about the whole thing. It almost seemed like a funny story he could tell later. Just as the neighbor was finishing her sewing job and leaning forward to snip the thread with her teeth, her husband walked in through the door. This guy was hanging out with his friends one night and ended up meeting a girl who had no arms and no legs. Despite her unique situation, they hit it off pretty well. They shared a few drinks and really enjoyed each other's company. As the night progressed and he was driving her home, she came up with a rather adventurous idea. She said, "If you can just place me in that tree over there, we could have a bit of fun together." The guy agreed and carefully positioned her in the tree, and they shared an intimate moment. After their rendezvous, he gently took her down from the tree and continued to drive her home. Upon arriving at her house, her father was waiting outside. To the guy's surprise, her dad started praising him. "You're such a great guy," her dad exclaimed. "Why don't you come over next week? We'd love to have you around more often." The guy, feeling a bit confused and awkward about the whole situation, replied, "Hold on a second, I only just met your daughter tonight. I placed her in a tree and, well, we had a bit of a moment." To which the girl's dad responded, "Yeah, I know. But you see, most guys don't bother bringing her back after that. They just leave her in the tree." There was this sex addict, an alcoholic, and a chain smoker who decided to visit a hypnotist together. The hypnotist was known for his unique and powerful methods. He looked at each of them and said, "While you're under hypnosis, I'm going to give you a warning. If any of you indulge in your bad habits again, the consequence will be immediate death." After the session, all three of them left, feeling a bit skeptical but intrigued by the hypnotist's words. As they were walking back, chatting and discussing the experience, they passed by a bar. The alcoholic among them started feeling really tempted. He looked at his friends and declared, "You know what? I don't buy what that hypnotist said. There's absolutely no way just one little drink is going to kill me." With that, he shrugged and walked into the bar. The sex addict and the chain smoker were curious and a bit nervous about what might happen, so they decided to wait outside to see if the hypnotist's warning held any truth. After a few tense minutes, the alcoholic emerged from the bar, took one step onto the sidewalk, and to the utter shock of his friends, he suddenly dropped dead right then and there. The remaining two men were completely taken aback and couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. They continued walking down the street in silence, processing what had happened. As they were walking, a stranger ahead of them flicked an almost full cigarette onto the sidewalk before entering a store. The chain smoker stopped in his tracks, his eyes fixed on the discarded cigarette. Seeing this, the sex addict turned to him and said, "Listen, man, you can't do it. If you bend over and pick up that cigarette, it's going to be the end for both of us." An 82-year-old man decided to visit a brothel one day. He was feeling adventurous and wanted some excitement in his life. When he entered, he was greeted by a variety of women, but his eyes settled on one particularly beautiful lady. He chose her, and they went up to her room together. Once they were alone in the room, the woman, with a professional smile, asked the elderly man what he desired. The man, feeling a bit shy and embarrassed at first, hesitated. But after a moment, he gathered his courage and told her that he would like a beige. The woman agreed and began her work. However, despite her skill and efforts, the man wasn't responding physically. The woman kept trying, but it soon became apparent that the man was having trouble getting aroused. A few minutes passed, and the woman's jaw was beginning to hurt from the effort. Realizing she might need some help, she called in one of her colleagues to assist her. The second woman joined in, and together they tried various techniques and methods, hoping to get a reaction from the man. But unfortunately, nothing seemed to work. Even after they called in a third woman to lend a hand, the man remained unresponsive. Finally, after nearly an hour of trying their best, the women realized that it was a lost cause. They had to give up. The first woman, feeling a bit sorry for the man, apologized and said, "I'm really sorry we couldn't help you out." The man just smiled and replied, "Oh, don't worry about it. My old fella hasn't worked in decades, but it's been a long time since it got this much attention and was this clean." One evening, there was this elderly couple spending a quiet night in their living room. They were listening to the radio, which was playing a late-night show. The husband wasn't feeling too well, dealing with some general ailments that come with age, and the wife was suffering from arthritis, which gave her constant and nagging pain in her joints. They were both sitting there, somewhat forlorn, wishing for something that could ease their discomforts. Just then, a preacher's voice came on the radio, sounding very charismatic and convincing. He announced, "Folks out there listening to this radio, I have a message for you. If you're suffering from any kind of affliction, I have the power to heal you through this radio. All you have to do is place one hand on the radio and the other hand on whatever part of your body is in pain or suffering, and I will pray for your healing." The wife's eyes lit up when she heard these words. She turned to her husband, Paul, with a spark of hope and said excitedly, "Paul, did you hear what that preacher just said? He claims he can cure us with his prayers through the radio." Paul, on the other hand, was a bit more cynical and doubtful about such claims. He didn't really believe that a voice on the radio could heal them, but seeing his wife's enthusiasm and hope, he decided not to dampen her spirit. He thought, well, there's no harm in trying. So the couple slowly made their way to the radio, each of them hobbling a bit due to their age and ailments. The wife, with her arthritis causing her a lot of pain, carefully placed one hand on her knee, which was swollen and sore. She then placed her other hand on the radio, closing her eyes and hoping for a miracle. Paul, however, had a different plan. Without saying anything to his wife, he slyly placed his hand on his crotch. The wife looked over at him. She couldn't help but comment on his choice of affliction. She said, "Paul, that preacher on the radio said he could heal the sick, not raise the dead.